Welcome, everyone. This is Bob Jakowski. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. And this is going to be, I think, a very enjoyable, fantastic webinar in terms of content and valuable information that we can deliver to you today. Today, we're going to talk about market intelligence and how do you apply market intelligence to dominate and win your markets in 2021. So we're very excited to have you join us today. As we do with all of our webinars at On Demand Advisors, we'd love to get your input. So please go ahead and post your questions to the right side and let us know what questions that you have throughout today's webinar. We'll make sure that ourselves, our guest speakers, address your questions either during the webinar, and if we have too many questions, we'll make sure we address them after the webinar. So again, thank you very much for your participation. So Craig and I, we founded On Demand Advisors 12 years ago, and we are a global revenue growth agency. Essentially, if you think about boiling this down, what we do is we engage with executives like those of you that are joining us today and help you scale your revenue growth. Help you do it so that it's predictable, it's capital efficient, and consistent. Prior to doing this, for myself, I've been a serial CEO for both public and private companies in Silicon Valley. And I've helped build 10 different B2B companies at different stages, all the way from startup companies to mid-stage companies to large companies. What I've really always been passionate about is understanding and applying how to grow revenue and do it in such a way that it represents best practices in a way that cuts across all the different areas that you typically have in a company, including marketing, services, sales, business development, alliances, and other areas. Craig Remy is just fantastic in terms of when I first met him, he was a serial CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, and we worked together at a number of companies. And so he really has looked at scaling many, many companies. He's helped many of our clients do that in a very demonstrable way. The great news about Craig's background, not only has he been in the CMO role many times, but before that, he spent quite a bit of time in the area of branding, positioning for large global companies, including Google, Disney, Levi Strauss, and many other companies out there. So he really gets how to take your company and make it look larger than life, how to take your company and position it in the right areas, how to engage with your buyer and do that in a demonstrable way. So together, we really enjoy working with our team, and we're going to introduce next another member of our team too, because when we built On Demand Advisors, we realized when you have market intelligence, when you have a revenue growth plan, you need to be able to implement that plan, make that plan real, activate the goals that you have for 2021 and achieve those goals. So that's why when we built our company, we actually have 4 practices. We have strategy, which includes market intelligence. We have sales and sales enablement. We have marketing, and we also have business development and alliances. So regardless of what you're trying to accomplish in terms of your growth, we can apply the right resources, the right talent, best practices to actually help you get there. Let me introduce Stefan. Stefan Sorger is a partner at On Demand Advisors. He's going to be primarily our guest speaker for today as we're talking about market intelligence. So if you look at Stefan's background, he just brings a tremendous depth in this area to the table. He's been a director of product strategy at SAP Labs. He's been a director of product marketing at Oracle. He worked with Craig and I as a senior director in product marketing at Determine, a public company. And he also has been in both product management and engineering management positions in a number of other companies. The key here is that when you're working at a company like SAP or Oracle, you're looking at many, many different markets. You're looking at lots of market intelligence globally, and really trying to decipher where the company needs to go. Where are the opportunities for the company? So that's just tremendous in terms of the background that Stefan brings to us today in our discussion. Stefan's also an adjunct faculty member at USF and UC Berkeley. And as you can see below, he also has published many well-known books in this area, such as Marketing Planning, Where Strategy Meets Action, Marketing Analytics, Strategic Models and Metrics, and most recently, Price Analytics, Strategy, Tactics, and Execution, which was recently published. So you can tell in terms of his background, he brings tremendous depth and expertise to this topic today. So welcome, Stefan.
Thank you, Bob.
To lay the foundation for today, I'd like to share with you a set of best practices. When Craig and I were at Intact a number of years ago, a software as a service company where we partnered with Salesforce and went to market together, we provided financial applications to over 5,000 new customers that we signed up, and sold those applications through 300 different partners. And we also worked with companies like Salesforce to provide a complete solution. What we wanted to do, though, was create what I'm going to show you today, which is the revenue acceleration map, which is a set of best practices united together to actually help B2B companies scale and grow their revenue and do that in a demonstrable way. We wanted to do it in such a way so that we connected the dots, because what I saw previously at working at other companies is that there were typically silos. There was marketing, there was sales, there was product management, there was services, and so forth. And I realized that today, the revenue creation process cuts across all these different silos and needs to be unified. So here's the revenue acceleration map. For today's conversation, we're going to focus primarily on number 2, which is some of the building blocks to scale. In number 1, this is a webinar that we did 2 weeks ago. We talked about how to engineer your revenue growth for 2021. And we're going to do that webinar again in early February. But as we look at number 2, this being strategic areas, we talk about creating your revenue growth plan for 2021. Today, Stefan's going to walk us through market intelligence. What does that mean to apply market intelligence? How is that going to impact your company? And why is it necessary for you to go dominate and win your market? We also talk about building out, as you can see below here, buyer use cases. Because if we work with companies, let's say we work with a Internet of Things company, an IoT company, sometimes they have great innovations, but they haven't fully expressed all the different use cases for that solution. And then recently, we did, 4 weeks ago, we actually conducted a webinar on buyer intelligence. So this is a companion piece. If you think about markets, Stefan's going to talk about the addressable markets and how do you go win those markets. In buyer intelligence, it's about working with 50 to 100 of your decision makers and really understanding from their perspective what's important to them. How do they think? And what's going to engage with them today to solve their business challenges. These other areas in red is marketing, is sales, is in yellow, and then other revenue growth vectors is in number 7 over here on the right-hand side. But for today, we're really going to focus on market intelligence. So if you think about this and you say, what if I had market intelligence? If you had comprehensive total market intelligence on the markets that you're addressing or serving today, how would it change your business? How would it change your company? Well, one of the things we're going to talk about today is migrating from what we call competing to a winning strategy. So when we first met one of our clients in 2011, we talked to the CEO, and they had been in the same vertical market for about 13 years. And as we talked to Mike, we observed and said, you have a competing strategy, not a winning strategy. And Mike said, well, what's the difference? And we shared with him that every year he was winning new clients but he didn't actually have a strategy to go win that entire market. And so based upon the things that we're going to be talking about today, we actually helped him go out there and truly win that market. And not only win that market, but go out and win 5 adjacent markets. If you have market intelligence, you're also going to be able to understand your total addressable market that you have out there for your solutions. You'll be able to address the needs for the segments that you have in the market. One of the things that I've always found interesting is Jeffrey Moore talks about the adoption curve for any type of solution. And so you've got your early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. And so Stefan's going to talk about different strategies that you can use to offer solutions for each of those segments. So again, if you have market intelligence, you can expand into adjacent markets before you invest. You can then couple what we talk about buyer intelligence for true insight into your target audience. But most importantly, you're now deploying a data-driven approach to drive action, results, and revenue for your company. So as we talk about today, and Stefan walks you through our market intelligence program, we're going to also apply that to one of our clients. So one of our clients is Integrity, and Integrity is a global leader in asset integrity management solutions. And they provide those solutions to a number of different industries: oil and gas and renewable energies, pipeline and mining companies, chemical processing companies, as an example. So they provide these solutions globally. So a company like Chevron would be a client of theirs, for instance, or Enbridge, or many of these large companies, using their software solutions and their services to actually help manage all those assets that they have globally. One of the things that they did is they engaged on-demand advisors to perform a market intelligence project with them, an initiative with them, to really look at how their market and these companies are thinking about asset integrity management. And one of the things that we'll talk about as we go through the program is how did Stefan and the team apply these different intelligence tools and aspects and initiatives to Integrity. So how do we actually move the needle when we're talking about market intelligence for Integrity? Okay, so Stefan, if you could move forward and take the baton and help walk the audience through the market intelligence program, I'd really appreciate that.
Thank you, Bob. And it's my pleasure to talk about the market intelligence program. And what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through the 10 steps that you see on your screen. And we're going to say how they were applied to the example client of Integrity. And then we're going to wrap it up at the end where Bob talks about the rather large 5 major business outcomes that Integrity enjoyed as a result of this process. So in the next slide, we'll start with number 1. We start by looking at what we call company insight. We're looking for some kind of unique attribute of your company. And this can be many things. A lot of times companies will say, okay, what is the one key feature that we can have that nobody else has? And that is generally not a very effective strategy, because even if you can find that one unique feature, a competitor can copy that pretty quickly. So we look for other areas, deep expertise, maybe a certain kind of management team, different kind of market focus. It can be just about anything. And we search hard and deep to find that. Ideally, what we want to find is something that's inherent with the DNA of the company. In the case of Integrity, what we found was a truly unique heritage and commitment to the industry, as demonstrated through the beginnings of the company being a cross-functional consortium of industry experts all getting together to decide how are we going to build this thing? What's the foundation of this software going to be? On the next slide, we talk about step number 2, which is market insight. And that is, what's the total addressable market? So In traditional analyst reports, this would just be a number in terms of dollars. While the number of dollars available is interesting, it's not particularly actionable. And in on-demand advisors, we focus on actionability. So we do give the number, but we also say, where's the low-hanging fruit? Where's something we can win in the market right away? In the case of Integrity, that was as a result of both the market intelligence program and the buyer intelligence program identifying a major addressable market. And that was a finding that many companies are still using old-fashioned paper and Microsoft Excel for data management rather than taking advantage of a lot of the modern innovations in data science, data management, and so forth for asset integrity management. The next step we show is slide 3, where we look at the continuation of market insight, where we say, who are the target segments and what do they represent in terms of the product life cycle? As Bob said, we have early adopters, early majority, and so forth. We started the project at Integrity saying, we think there's a lot of early adopters. We explored that question with the market intelligence and buyer intelligence, and we ended up refuting that question. In other words, the market data shows different. The market data does not show early adopters. Indeed, it shows late majority and laggards, and that resulted in a big change to the type of marketing that we did, to the type of collateral that we did, to the sales process that we did, really to the way we engage with the market. On the next slide, we see step number 4, which is to identify market trends that are going to influence the strategic direction. In other words, we want to graft onto those trends to move our company forward and to also take advantage of the tailwinds that those market trends deliver. 3 trends that we found from Integrity, for example, was the trend toward increasing regulations at the federal, state, and local level. And that's just not for the United States, that's true worldwide. Number 2, the trend toward much more data, much more evidence-based practices. And number 3, a trend toward increased desire for mobility, to have this area where customers are constantly moving. On the next slide, we see step 5, where we start with the competitive insight. We'll identify the top 5 competitors. We'll develop the competitor profiles. A lot of the focus is on the go-to-market or GTM approach. In the case of Integrity, it showed an opportunity in the market for bundling. And by that, I mean partnering with other companies in the space to provide value-added options. We found that a lot of the customers that Integrity faced had a lot of situations and issues they were facing. How can we give that as one big package of solution? In terms of product, we showed that many of the competitors of Integrity lacked integration capability, and that hurt those companies. In terms of the companies, we also saw that some of the competitors that they were initially looked at weren't really a good fit for the competitive profile. They were doing deep water drilling, other issues. We don't have to worry about them so much. Instead, let's focus on the competitors that are really going to be more of a challenge for our client. In step 6, on the next slide, we continue with competitive insight, and we do a SWOT analysis where we examine the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the different competitors. In the case of Integrity, when we looked at the competitive profiles, we saw that many of the companies with which we were dealing were part of larger multinationals. which can be a strength in terms of them having financial resources. The weaknesses, though, were that their expertise was in general asset management, not so much asset integrity management, and not so much expertise in any particular industry. They'll do asset management in petroleum, but they might do asset management in railroads and other areas. So not a lot of commitment or focus on the areas that Metegrity's customers care about. For opportunities, a lot of the companies could leverage other parts of their business. Again, these are all large multinationals, many different operating divisions. They could leverage the two different businesses together. I was actually shocked that a lot of these companies chose not to do so, really leaving a lot of money on the table through that approach. And then the threats, of course, were ongoing threats of tariffs, other restrictions, a lot of increased regulations, which in the short term will be a threat. In the long term, though, could be seen as an opportunity because it'll introduce more action to start examining solutions of this type. On the next slide, on step 7. Yes, sir.
May I ask a question? What does someone do when they have quite a few competitors in their market as you go through that process? How does this step apply when you're in that situation?
That's a great question. We frequently will have client companies that come to us in highly mature industries with dozens, sometimes hundreds, and in one case, thousands of competitors, all offering pretty similar goods. In one case, for example, we had a client in the education industry. They faced literally thousands of competitors with seemingly identical types of offerings. There, what we're looking for is not really a new feature, but rather we want to examine the market intelligence and also the buyer intelligence to say not what's being offered, but what it is that buyers actually want. And what we found was that buyers are much more interested in a one-stop solution. They want not just the software to enable the education, they want the education itself. We actually wound up having a partner program where this company partnered with another organization to provide more of a one-stop shopping area as their go-to-market. And that we found was a very successful strategy to engage with the market with many competitors.
Thank you.
In step 7, we continue with competitive insight, where we examine our SWOT versus other SWOTs. The idea here is to get an idea about the gaps, the weaknesses, and to figure out our own strengths. In the case of Metegrity, the gaps were that it's very, very strong, unique heritage, unique expertise, unique way they treated the data. It was almost more of a data science approach to managing this audit data and inspection data and so forth. Whereas the competitors, yeah, they did do inspections and so forth, but the benefits were very general. They were never very specific to solve any one problem. What we found was, we wanted to identify how that actually shows up in the day-to-day processes of this client company. And we pinpointed it really comes down to the implementation program. We found that our competitors, many of them would just say, okay, here's the software, you can download it, and just, if you have a problem, let us know. And no, our client Metegrity didn't do that. Instead, they had a very rigorous implementation program. They took the opportunity of the implementation program to say, how does your company work? What are the business processes? What are some best practices that we found working with other companies that we can share with you to make your own processes better? So it was really almost an audit of the operations. And again, this is done by highly skilled subject matter experts, many of them with 3 decades of experience working with large multinational companies in this industry, who really bring a lot of skill to the table. And customers liked it. Customers would go on and on and on how the implementation program really made the difference for them, and it really cemented the value that they saw in that solution. In the next slide, we go to step 8, which is how do we translate this into action? And we translate it into action through strategic initiatives. And we look at how do we penetrate our existing markets further? How do we expand into nearby adjacent markets? And what unique competitive advantages do we have that we can actually leverage into those adjacent markets? And oftentimes, like Bob said earlier, many times we'll develop a strategic alliance, a partnership, a sell-through opportunity, a bundling program, many other ways to go to market. Indeed, if I look at many of these competitive analyses, almost always customers are looking for solutions, not just a bunch of software, and they appreciate this type of more holistic go-to-market approach. In the case of Integrity, we increased the penetration into existing markets, which was the petroleum market. And we also expanded into the adjacent market, which is the chemical market. What made that possible was the unique advantage that Integrity brought, which was not just to be able to handle the normal kinds of fluids and gases that petroleum would have, but rather highly corrosive substances, fluids and gases that most companies can't handle, that Integrity can. And whereas that's a nice to have in petroleum, it's a must have in chemical. The chemical manufacturing industry really needs that type of expertise. And we found the expansion into that adjacent market very successful as a result of that unique advantage. In the next slide, we talk about step 9, where we actually create an expansion plan to grow revenue. We'll show what the steps are, we'll declare the market segments, we'll identify the methods to penetrate those segments, and we'll look at different prioritization of markets. In the case of Integrity, we expanded in the chemical industry, especially those with critical assets. These could be highly large companies, ones with widely distributed assets over a large footprint. These could be ones that are working with a lot of corrosive types of liquids and gases. In terms of segments, we especially looked at companies that have not adopted full data analytics techniques yet, that are still using paper and Excel, because they can see huge benefits by moving to more of an evidence-based practice that's more data-based. And then in terms of methods, what are the pain points to target beyond just moving from paper and Excel to a more of a data-based approach? What are some other things we can look at? And one of those areas was a much more mobile-oriented approach. As these plants get larger and larger and larger, we want to make the productivity greater for the people that are working there, and mobile is one very successful approach in doing that. On the next slide, on slide 10, we continue with the strategic initiatives to say, how is it that we actually drive consensus with all the stakeholders, with the management team, with the board of directors, with the partners? And that's really saying, what are the core principles that we are going to leverage at this company? And again, when we start out these kind of projects, a lot of times the go-to-market is a little more than just a whole laundry list of features and benefits that this company can offer to customers. that's not a very effective way to market. Instead, what we said is, what are the 3 big initiatives? What are the 3 big entities that we can go to market with? In the case of Integrity, that was RBI, AIPSM, and APPM. RBI was risk-based inspection. We found that a lot of the customers that Integrity has would either over or under inspect their different assets, resulting in a lot of wasted money and increased safety issues. So again, RBI can address that. Number 2 was a process safety management, but tailored toward asset integrity. And as regulations continue to increase, we're very optimistic about this being a major initiative from Integrity. And the 3rd one would be the asset performance priority management. And this is the old 80-20 rule. We want to focus the staff there, especially the senior staff, on that 20% of the assets that are going to cause 80% of the issues. And we found that to be a very effective way to use the skilled labor that's present at these companies. On the next slide, we can show how this would result in some pretty major business opportunities.
Thanks, Stefan. Thanks for walking everybody through the 10 areas of a market intelligence assessment initiative. So that's fantastic. What I'd like to do now is talk based upon Stefan and the team working with Integrity and the management team to conduct the market intelligence program. He's really hinted as we've gone through this process about some of the major initiatives that we've been able to work with Integrity to undertake. And so I'd like to step through just a couple of them. One of the things I think that Stefan really talked about that differentiates our company in terms of how we approach market intelligence is about driving business outcomes for our clients. So you have this wonderful intelligence. The question is, how do you apply it? Asset integrity management, or AIM, as it's known in the industry, has been around for a number of decades. So many companies may have thought, well, I do asset management somehow. I may do it with, as Stefan said, I may do it manually with Excel spreadsheets. I may do it time-based approach instead of RBI. I may be doing it a number of different ways, but I kind of think I'm getting it done. What we found is that there are 3 important initiatives or vectors that really got the attention of decision makers in this target audience: RBI, PSM, and APPM. So those are the vectors that we're working with them to actually go to market with as we look at this. So if you think about market intelligence, it's about creating that unique insight into your market, validating that information with decision makers and stakeholders, and then applying that in your revenue growth strategy. Another thing that we did is we synchronized the work that Stefan and the team did in terms of market intelligence with another initiative around business intelligence or buyer intelligence, because we truly wanted to understand what do decision makers find that's important. So we worked with Integrity and the team to actually execute a buyer intelligence survey. And we found that the buyers in different categories had different needs. If I currently was using, as Stefan said, a manual paper-based, Excel-based approach for managing assets, then I'm looking for specific solutions and why I'm going to move from this more manual process to a much better database-oriented process. If I'm using another AIM competitor or provider, then I'm looking at what am I missing that Integrity offers to me. So it was really looking at identifying different segments and how to engage, educate, and message to those segments. We also realized when we executed the business intelligence and buyer intelligence process that much more than anybody expected, many of the companies were not even applying risk-based inspection as a primary method for looking at their assets. So that became really, really truly novel and revolutionary in terms of looking at the market differently. And we also realized that many companies had not quantified what is the ROI that they could achieve by managing their assets more efficiently. So that led us down the path in terms of creating the right assets with Integrity that they could use to integrate with the market.
Bob, you make a great point here on the previous slide on number 2, where it says, realize that many do not leverage RBI. And we see this again and again and again when it comes to market intelligence. Clients will come to us and they feel that they know everything there is to know about the market. And they come to us oftentimes with faulty assumptions. They think that their customers are doing one thing when in fact they're not doing that. And I think, one of the outcomes should be, how do you know that the market is doing what you think it's doing? That big question is, how do we validate those findings? In the case of Integrity here, we found that, like you said, 40% was not using RBI, which should really be a red flag to everyone who's listening to this webinar. How are you validating the findings?
You bring up an excellent point, Stefan, because the reason I think it's excellent is that just take what's happened to most companies in the past 9 months with COVID. How has that changed their company? How has it changed the way they operate? How does it change the processes that they have today? So the key here is that from time to time, you need to validate your assumptions at both the market and buyer level. And these are some excellent tools to be able to do that. From the market intelligence and buyer intelligence that we worked together with the management team, with Integrity in their key markets, just looking at specifically how did it drive the engagement roadmap in the chemical industry. You can see that what we've done with them is we're creating the assets that their target audience is asking for. So for instance, when Stefan talked about 40% of the companies are not using risk-based inspection or RBI, we wanted to create an asset that educated them around ROI, but even more importantly, educated them about the ROI, the return on investment of ROI. So we just look at some of these how we took that intelligence and converted that. Here's some great examples. So for instance, in this ebook, we worked with the target audience to create what's the ROI for RBI with the target audience, and really providing the information in a very digestible, informative way in terms of how they were going to use that information today to run their business. So these are just different offerings that we created for Integrity and for the buyer. Here's another example that we found that we created based upon the market intelligence that Stefan and the team did. If a good portion of the audience is still doing the asset management manually, and they were going to be looking at investing in a solution going forward, we wanted to create a buyer's guide. So here's a great example of a buyer's guide that we created with their assistance for their target audience in the industry. We talked about the things that are important in terms of RBI, process safety management, and asset performance priority management. And we also talked about how they can then move from a manual method to an automated method, how to move from an automated method to a best-in-class method for their company. And so that's something that we covered. But again, it all goes back to the roadmap that was delivered from the market intelligence initiative that we had with them. Another outcome that we were able to drive with Integrity based upon the market intelligence initiative with them was to really look at a number of different things that were important and that is to identify what their prospects, what their customers thought included the whole solution. So VE, or Visions Enterprise, is the integrity management, asset integrity management solution that they offer. But also adding mobility to that for all of the remote inspectors, and adding other additional services that are complementary to this solution is what their audience was asking for. So we're helping them drive that to add the complementary products, add the complementary services that their clients are looking for. What this really serves to do is increase the wallet share that they have for each of their global customers that they're working with. The next one is talking about working through a coverage strategy. So as you can imagine, with these companies in oil and petroleum and gas, in chemical, in mining, and in other asset-intensive industries, these companies typically are global. They have large footprints, and they need to be served across the board. And so what we work with them on, based upon our market intelligence and understanding the market, is a tiered approach in terms of coverage. So for instance, Integrity may partner with ABB, a very large, significant partner globally, to serve some of the global needs of global players. But there are many companies in the mid-market, for instance, in the chemical industry, that are really focusing on process safety management, or PSM. And so partnering with ABS is an excellent way to actually reach that market and do that with great credibility. For smaller companies in the chemical market, there are a myriad of independent inspection services companies that are managing those assets. And so providing the solution through those companies and with those companies is the route to market. So as you can see, out of market intelligence with Integrity, we were able to look at a tiered approach in terms of coverage to reach the chemical industry, to address the chemical industry's needs, and to provide best-in-class solutions. What I'd like to do at this time is open this up for Q&A. Specifically, if you have questions for Stefan, I'll bring those up. Just go ahead, if you could, post those questions here, and we'll address those questions. So we appreciate any and all questions from our audience today. One of the things that did come up earlier, this is from TJ and from Jim, is wanted to find out if we were recording this webinar. Indeed, we are. So for all the registrations for today's webinar, you'll be receiving a recorded copy of today's webinar as well. You're welcome to see and view this later and figure out how do you apply these nuggets, if you will, golden nuggets to your company, but also be in a situation to share this across other colleagues that you have in your company today. So let's go ahead and start with the questions. This first question is from Brett. Brett asked, how does reopening after COVID affect my business? So Stefan, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. So reopening with COVID or after COVID is going to affect both sides, from a supply side and from a demand side. From a supply side, the question is going to, a lot of analysts are predicting very robust demand when businesses are reopened. And the question is going to be, how are you going to fulfill that demand? Do you have the supply chain and so forth to do it? And where do you fall in the scheme of the other competitors? Even more important is, what about the buyer? How has the buyer changed? I think we can all agree that this last year has brought along a lot of change, and buyers are no different. Buyers have changed. They're looking at a lot more remote work. They're looking at different processes. One of the questions is, how has the buyer changed, and how will you validate that? How will you know what it is that buyers want now versus in 2019?
For what you went through, Stefan, you talked about conducting a market intelligence initiative for a company. How long does that typically take to do that?
Of course, it depends from client to client, depending on what the setup is. Generally, we can get it done in just a few weeks.
Okay. This question is from Tiffany. What Tiffany asked is, she says, we have strong competition. How does a market intelligence help me with this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob, and something we get a lot. In many of with clients that we work with, they have situations where they have dozens, maybe hundreds of competitors, and they want to know how they can stand out. And again, I would caution you not to try to feature your way out of it. It's pretty rare that you will find one feature that you have that no one else has, because number one, unless it's a brand new industry, that's not likely. Number two, even if you could identify that one missing feature, you don't know if buyers actually want it. And even if they do, it's pretty easy for competitors to copy. You'll win a couple of deals, and after that, competitors will figure it out. They'll copy it, not exactly, but pretty close enough to fulfill it. What we do is we focus much more on go-to-market. So like I said before in the webinar, you can look at many different ways to differentiate your company. It won't necessarily just be the product. It could be the geographies that you focus on. It could be the segments you focus on. It could be the implementation. It could be any number of different things. But until you conduct that analysis, you really won't know for sure. We found that, it's like the old cobbler's shoes problem. Companies themselves don't do a good job in identifying their strengths and weaknesses. It's kind of ironic. You really need that outside viewpoint to gain clarity.
That's a good point. This one, the question, Stefan, is from Patrick. He says, I'm in healthcare. Does this apply to us as well?
Again, a great question. Thanks for that question, Patrick, and keep those questions coming. Yeah, for healthcare, of course, that's a strongly growing industry. We're finding increased interest in the healthcare space as a result of COVID. We, as well as other analysts, are anticipating booms in healthcare in 2021 and beyond. The challenge that we face is, number one, there are a lot of competitors. Number two, it's a very highly regulated industry. And again, the way to look at that is how can you take advantage of those regulations? The big thing that we found with many companies, including Metechnity, is rather than seeing the regulations as a threat to your operations, see it as an opportunity for your customers. Your customers will need to adopt that. And the question is, how can we leverage the increasing regulations as a forcing function to get customers on the latest and greatest version of your product?
Stefan, this question is from Greg. Greg asked, what's the time frame and milestones for this type of initiative?
Again, that's a great question. We will generally recommend we do a market intelligence program first. We want to get a general idea of what's happening with the market. So step one is to start that program. Step two, we start looking at the total addressable market. We break it down to individual segments. Like we said, with the 10-step process here, we'll go through to identify the competitors. We'll then really do an interesting job with figuring out where the customers are in the life cycle. We'll identify the trends. We'll look at the SWOT. And then we spend quite a bit of time on the go-to-market. Whereas many companies might look at SWOTs, although that does provide value, it's the go-to-market that we found really adds a lot of value. We spend a lot of time on that. A significant milestone then is identifying those partners or other companies with whom we can make a more complete solution. And as you pointed out, Bob, we look at ABS, we look at ABB, we look at other companies to really give the buyers what they want. Having established that market intelligence, we then move on to the buyer intelligence, where we validate more data in terms of what it is that buyers actually want. Not what we think they want, but what they actually want.
That's good. Good set of questions there. I just bring back that. Okay, so what I'd like to do at this time, and thank you for answering all those questions, Stefan. I'd like to share with the audience some next steps. So what could you do next? Well, one of the things that you may consider doing is applying what Stefan and I and Craig have talked about today, which is either market and or buyer intelligence programs for your target markets. You may do that for your existing market. You may do that also if you're considering a new market. So for instance, what ends up happening with AvidXchange, one of our clients, is once we help them go and win their existing market, we actually help them then assess other adjacent markets to then decide which ones to go into and do it in a demonstrable way before they invested in that market. Or you may decide to do this if you are looking at bringing to the table a new solution or service in 2021, and you want to really investigate the market and the buyer in that market before you actually start that process. Another action you want to take is, in our last webinar, we talked about revenue engineering. If you want to create a revenue growth plan for your company in 2021, we're happy to help you create your revenue acceleration playbook. Here's some other steps that you may want to take. These are upcoming webinars. As you know from attending webinars with us in the past, we're totally focused on revenue growth innovation and how you can apply these best practices to your company. So just after the first of the year, on the 5th of January, we're going to talk about how a sales-driven website accelerates your sales cycle and revenue growth. So please join us with that because we'll talk about how to transform what most companies have today, which is an informational website, into a truly interactive website that's going to convert visitors into prospects. In January, we're also going to be talking about how to select the right partners to drive revenue growth. And then again, we're going to talk about how to engineer your revenue growth in 2021. So here's our contact information. Here's mine. Here's Craig's. Here's Stefan's. You're welcome to visit our website. On behalf of the three of us and our entire On-Demand Advisors team, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us in today's webinar. I look forward to providing any additional insights that you need, and also your takeaways in terms of market intelligence and how you can apply that to your company, to your markets to be successful in 2021. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and have yourself a fantastic day.